Welcome to Builder Nation Procurement Edition. We are exploring how hardware startups tackle the essentials of procurement, from sourcing components to managing supply chains and controlling costs. Keep watching to hear real-world strategies from industry leaders on overcoming procurement challenges to bring impactful products to market faster. Today we are joined by Thomas Frogger, Head of Manufacturing at Endiatx. Welcome, Thomas. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So to start with this, present yourself, tell us something about you and your work.
Yeah, so I am, as you mentioned, I'm Head of Manufacturing at Endiatx. We are a Silicon Valley-based startup working on the world's first virtual endoscope. And so our product is this little robot pill here that you swallow, and then the doctor drives it around your stomach in order to perform an endoscopy.
Yeah, I watched a video how it works, and it's crazy.
Yeah, no. And so the work I do as head of manufacturing, I kind of oversee the supply chain for the company, the manufacturing process, but I also work very closely with the mechanical and electrical engineers on the actual design of the product. And so, as many of you know, in the startup world, you tend to have many hats.
Yeah, and now that we are talking about Endiatx and the work that you do there, how procurement play a role there while the team is building the product? Because I know that the product evolves over these years, like was a little big one and then become even more little. So I want to know how procurement play a role while the team was developing this product.
Yeah, definitely. So as you mentioned, we started off with a Poolbot, I think is what you're referring to, which was quite a large football-sized device. And the real challenge was, how do we go from this large device down to the 13 by 30 millimeter bot we have today? Mm-hmm. And so there were several considerations that come into play here. And the first one being cost. And so we really leveraged the existing phone technologies and off-the-shelf components wherever possible. And this kept expenses manageable and streamlines sourcing. This approach allowed us to iterate quickly and without custom part lead times and high upfront costs. Another key component, as you can imagine, is the small size and the complexity of the design. And so early on, we had really limited manufacturing options. And so we really harnessed the power of 3D printing. This allows us to reduce costs and also expedite prototyping time. And now, as we're scaling up, we're moving towards more traditional processes such as injection molding. This reduces per unit costs, increased quality and consistency of the parts. Yeah. And really one of the challenges here when it comes to procurement is finding a contract manufacturer that's willing to support us through this transitional phase, as they tend to prefer to work with more established designs rather than early stage development.
Well, yeah, I think that will be really challenging for you and the team to go through the Poolbot to the small one that you have now. But what do you think are the most difficult decision that you had to take over all these years about procurement, about supply chain for Endiatx?
Yeah, so I think there was a few early decisions that really impacted our procurement strategy. And two of those was really the fact that we focused on in-house manufacturing, combine that with the use of off-the-shelf components, like I mentioned. Wow. This approach allowed us to really reduce production costs and keep them manageable, especially in the early stage of developments, and give us the agility we needed to get Poolbot to the place it is today.
Yeah, well, I think that, as you said, you have many challenges over all these years, and I think that making have the investors or the people that trust on the product to help to develop until they become the real little one that you have now was so difficult.
Yeah, it was quite challenging from the procurement perspective. The strategy allowed us to not need for specialized parts or suppliers, and that can be quite challenging to source within cost and timeline constraints that startups typically face. So instead, we really focused on sourcing raw materials and simpler components. And this is generally easier to replace or find secondary suppliers.
Yeah, and to manage this procurement and supply chain, you have any specific strategies or tools that you use to balance the cost control with when you maintain the quality during the procurement?
Yeah, so a big part of it is the regulatory side and the quality control. And so we have to vet all our suppliers pretty closely, and so this is all about building a relationship with them and building trust and having open communication. So we often go to their facilities to validate their processes and kind of check. And when it comes to medical devices, the regulatory side is very important. We tend to have to meet certain standards like ISO standards for QMS systems, and this does not only apply to us, but it also applies to our suppliers and the vendors that we work with.
Yeah,
I think some of
I think that it's really important, the relation with the suppliers, as you are saying.
yes, it's super important. Really having open communication with the suppliers allows to build trust and kind of like predict potential pitfalls down the line that we might face together. I also think that communication, not only with the suppliers, but also inside with the other engineers, is very important. So having the supply engineers work very closely with the electrical engineers, the manufacturing and mechanical engineers allows your team to kind of figure out what are some of the bottlenecks and the long lead times, for example, that might come up. And this allows us to relocate resources and kind of fix the timeline if needed.
Mm-hmm. I know that you mentioned about the pitfalls. What do you think are the most important pitfalls that people needs to avoid about procurement, about when they are having a startup or they are building a product?
Some of the pitfalls is not considering multiple suppliers from the get-go, right? And so if especially at the small scales, you as a startup, you tend to not be a priority. And so you don't get access to those like lower costs involved. And so having multiple suppliers that are willing to work with you and kind of having alternate paths that you can take is really important from the get-go, especially in the early stages.
Yeah, I think that that's super important too. And now that you are mentioning what the people don't have to do, what do you think they have to do when they build a strategy for procurement? What is the most important for that?
Yeah. So, I think I've mentioned a few, prioritizing communication is really key. I think harnessing the power of your team's professional network is very important, especially in startups. You have a very limited team, and seeing what are the past experiences they've had, what is kind of the relationship they've had with suppliers, and kind of using that to your advantage. This not only allows access to new suppliers, specialist parts, and alternate solutions, but also gets you a head start on that relationship part of the challenges that you might face.
So, and my last question will be like, what we are talking about like now about the business, about the company and the startups. What do you think is essential for a company to establish a purchasing policy? Why it's important or why it's essential?
Yeah, definitely. Purchasing policy is super important because it should be taken into account from the get-go, right? I think the example for Endiatx really was our decision to use in-house manufacturing and off-the-shelf parts, and that decision from the beginning really trickled down all the way to today. And so if we didn't have that mindset and thinking about procurement from the beginning, we would be facing really long lead times, especially when it comes to regulatory, right? This can lead to the need for redesigns, finding new suppliers, building new relationships, and this can really cost. And in a startup environment, cost and timelines is the most important thing. So
yeah, it's like gold.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I think that as you said, the supplier relation, the communication with them, and also inside the company is really important. I think that there are really valuable advices for people that are starting a company, they are having startup, they are start to build a product for the first time. So I think that was really helpful to hear that ideas from you. So thank you so much, Thomas, for being here and share all these ideas about procurement, about supply chain. You have any social media, maybe LinkedIn or a website you would like to share?
Yeah, definitely look me up on LinkedIn and check us out at endiatx.com to follow our journey.
Okay, perfect. And for everybody that is watching, be sure to visit our website, buildernation.io. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn by following Builder Nation for the latest updates and exclusive content. Thank you all for being part of this amazing community. We will see you in the next episode. And thanks again to Thomas for joining us today.